We're going to talk about genre films, and first we have to define what that actually means. Obviously, genre usually refers to fantasy, science fiction, horror films, thrillers, but quite often it's also seen as something superficial and not maybe at the same level of drama films, which are seen more important or tackling social issues and important themes. Well, that's not the case always. Genre films can be so many things. The main reason why we are using the genre idea is basically that that makes the films easy to categorize and easier for an audience to find them. So we talked about that last night when we were preparing for this panel, and Colin at least had some ideas of what the genre concept means to a promotion of a film.
Genre films, I feel, are much more accessible to audiences and to markets, and these are the films that will introduce audiences to national cinemas oftentimes. We were talking about Korean films last night, how personally for me, going up to film festivals in the 1990s, Korean films really didn't speak to me at all. What I saw were very kind of boring period films that I felt that was my interpretation, and it wasn't until I saw Tell Me Something and The Foul King, a comedy about wrestlers, that kind of changed my mind about Korean cinema and was really an excellent kind of entryway and gate point into a nation's cinema. It wasn't through the art house films, it wasn't through the dramas, it was through black comedies and horror films. And that's kind of the gateway drug, really, to a nation's cinema.
And Todd mentioned Vanishing Waves as well.
Yeah, I think when you're looking at reaching an international audience, the challenge that international cinema has is increasingly the same challenge that American independent cinema has, where the marketing is all based around, for the big Hollywood films, it's based around like a big name, either a big director, a big actor, somebody like that. If you have that, you can market it. With an international film, you don't have any of that. And so trying to convince people that they should spend their money to see your movie when all you've got is basically a pitch, and your pitch is, this is a sad story about a family sitting around a table waiting for the grandfather to die, people aren't going to pay to see that movie. They're fundamentally not. What genre film does is it gets you around that, because genre film, even in America and everywhere, is sold not on actors so much, not on directors, although it can be. It's sold on an idea. And you pitch people an idea, and that's something they can grab a hold on and they can understand no matter where they are and no matter what the culture is, and that gets them through the door. And then genre film, I think, is incredibly malleable in terms of once you've got them through the door, what do you do with them? I'm a very firm believer that science fiction is the absolute best venue to talk about a lot of social issues in a way that can actually engage an audience. If you want to talk about social ethics and what political decisions can mean to people in a way that they're going to engage with and grab a hold of, you can do things in science fiction that you would never get away with in a social drama, because you can push things right out to their logical extreme and say, you know what, if we're going to go down this road, this is what it looks like. And you can really go there and you can go for it. And yeah, we talked specifically last night about a movie about Vanishing Waves, which I work with the Fantastic Fest in Austin, and we screened it there. And I am very, very confident that nobody involved working at that festival, nobody in the audience at that festival had ever seen a movie from Lithuania before. Most of them probably didn't know that Lithuania made movies at all. Some of them probably didn't know Lithuania existed. And that movie walked out of there having won every award that it qualified for, except for one, I believe, and then had the American sale announced on the back of that.
And another excellent case in point is obviously David Cronenberg from your country, Canada.
Yeah, I mean, Cronenberg's made a career, or he makes more normal movies now. But his early career, absolutely. I mean, Cronenberg is a guy who he's an idea guy, and the hook was always that he was going to do something that made you kind of unsettled, and he drew this young, edgy crowd because of that, but there was always another layer of things going on. And I think that's equally true of a lot of people, where I've always found it very strange that we look at genre film as somehow being inferior to art house, but the reality is when you look at who the majority of the big art house directors are now, or in America who the more intelligent of the mainstream directors are now, and you come up with names like David Cronenberg, Lars von Trier, Martin Scorsese, Darren Aronofsky, these are all genre guys, and they always have been. So I find it really strange when people are down on, or somehow are saying somehow, you know, art houses or genre film is somehow inferior. And you look at, like, von Trier's made 2 non-genre films in his entire career, and he's winning Cannes. So there's something very strange there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good fertile ground for directors to start out in, and kind of move their way up from that. And yeah, these are the films that travel and are seen and get the exposure, and so they shouldn't be looked down on. Yeah, and
For example, an example of pigeonholing films is if you look at Antichrist by von Trier, made by anybody else, it would have been seen as a horror film, but when it's a von Trier film, it's an art house film. So we talked about the entry point to a nation's cinema. Another film that we mentioned last night was Darkness in Tallinn.
Yeah, this is my own personal story, is that when I was going to the Toronto Film Festival as an audience member, I saw Darkness in Tallinn. And I had no idea really where Tallinn was or about this country's cinema. But I saw that film, and that was a genre film. That was a thriller. And that opened my eyes up to, you're giving me dagger eyes, yeah. But it traveled. And I remember trying to track that down afterwards on VHS, and but yeah, again, it's a very good idea, a good example of a very simple genre-based concept, which was made and was seen.
And the VHS tape of that one in the UK had a Quentin Tarantino quote on it. Yeah. He was calling it excellent. So there you are. So, Todd, you were also the producer on The Raid.
Yes.
Can we see the trailer? Yep. We'll see the trailer of this blockbusting Indonesian action film. it's really works well, and it has found an audience all around the world. Yeah. And it's funny to see in the American trailer that they're so totally downplaying the fact that it's not in English. There is no dialogue in it because it's not in English.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty clear what we're selling. But I mean, the backstory on the film, we were involved right from development, and you know, I worked with the director on his previous film as well. And when he made that movie, Merantau, Indonesia is a country that has an action tradition, but they hadn't made this style of movie for about 20 years when Geddes started on Merantau. They basically more or less stopped when an old star they had named Barry Prima retired. And so, like, the infrastructure didn't exist, like, nothing happened. And Gareth made this first film, which did very, very well in Indonesia, but the storyline was based around a very local rite of passage that it makes it a little bit difficult to pitch. And so when we started in this one, we sat down with him when we were working on the script, and the question was, okay, how can we tailor something that is going to be appealing to your local audience? You never want to forget about home. But is also something that is easy to pitch and easy to explain internationally. And so you have the flavor of both, because, I mean, that's what you need when you're going out. And we wrote this story, and they executed it. And, I mean, the film was made for just slightly north of $1 million, you know, which it's cheap to work in Indonesia. And people will do ridiculous things for very small amounts of money and have their heads bashed into the wall over and over again. But they made the film. In the local release, last time I looked, The Raid is now the #4 or #5 Indonesian language film of all time in their national box office. And it has sold out literally in every territory in the world. You know, Sony Classics distributed it in the United States, all of Latin America and Spain, and with similarly high-level distributors everywhere else. And kind of the spin-off from this, and the lasting impact of this is not only was it a big injection of cash into the local industry just from this one movie, and they have the sequel is going right now, but the longer-term effects is from this film, the lead actor, who when Gareth found him was a messenger boy for a telecom company, was cast in Keanu Reeves' directing film, Man of Tai Chi. The other guy, Joe Taslim, he was the guy with the knife in the face-off. Joe is wrapping up his work on Fast 6 right now. And as part of the deal with Sony, Sony also took remake rights to the film, which is being financed by Screen Gems and will shoot next year. And the original directors, writers, the original right holders are all still involved. They've been as involved as they want to be. Iko and Yayan, the fight choreographers, have been brought over and have been intricately involved. And then those rights fees end up coming back and feeding in, like it just feeds back into the local system. And it gives them the opportunity where, you know, they can potentially make another movie or probably even 2 movies if the Raid remake goes well, just off of the proceeds of that money. And they can go and they can do whatever they want, backed off of that.
I mean, when I screened The Raid at the Toronto National Film Festival in Midnight Madness, I was boasting and so proud that I think we probably broke the record for the most amount of people in a room to watch an Indonesian film. 1,200 people in a cinema. Probably the first time that number had ever been met in North America. To even when we did it, even when I did it for Ongbak as well. I'm sure that in North America, no one had ever gathered in that group en masse to watch a film from that country ever. And also with the discovery of Ongbak, another example of a good genre film, is that overnight it gave Thailand its very first internationally recognized superstar. And that was a cinema which had been existing for years and years. But yeah, and
Thailand's one of the oldest cinemas in the world.
And no one had ever been able to recognize or identify a Thai film star until that moment.
And how and why, as a Canadian, did you get involved with Indonesian film?
Oh, that's a long story. The short version is it all. for me, almost everything starts with the work that I do on my website. And when Gareth was shooting the previous film, he was sending me some behind-the-scenes EPK reels, just trying to get the word out. And it was on the third or fourth one of those where he showed a monitor the first time, and you could see what he was actually shooting. And as soon as I saw that, I wrote him and was just like, "You've really got something. What are you planning for international? Because you need to be planning now and getting ready now." And actually, that's something that's very important with any genre film, non-genre film, whatever. If you want to have a shot of breaking the international market, you really do need to be starting right from script, and have your targets in place. And with the raid, we literally, as soon as we knew when it was going into production, we sat down with the calendar and we worked everything out, and we knew immediately that the target was him. And we totally mapped out a strategy of how we were going to get to you in a way that would be effective. And we broke everything backwards in terms of, okay, well, this is when we want the first introduction to the market. What is our first image that we're going to put out? What outlet are we going to put it in? When are we going to release first footage? You know, at what point do we want to introduce it to the formal market, to like the sales markets, and what kind of materials? And we had that mapped, like literally from when the script was being written. And it was one of those freakish circumstances where everything actually worked, and we met our timeline and we didn't have to adjust, which normally never ever happens. But I think you need to be thinking that way right away. And that's another area where genre is very, very helpful, because there's such an established, hungry fan base, that if your idea is good, and if you have one or two really striking images, that's all you need to get people's attention. And then down the road, you have to back it up and you have to prove it. You have to prove that you've made something that can sustain and can hold. But to get through the door and to initially catch people's attention, it's quite easy if you're focused about it and if you're strategic about who you want to approach.
And let's get back to that in a minute. How about the Korean film? How important is the international market for Korean genre film?
Well, first I want to thank Stan to providing this outstanding forum for us to talk about the genre elements on the cinema. I'm from South Korea. South Korea is it's a small country, and but the film industry is quite developed, and one of the reasons being is the rich history of genre films, and that it's the Korea has suffered through many military regimes for generations, and what genre filmmakers did was they used those sex violence as a sort of allegory to spoke against the oppression of regime from the government and what have you. So when Korea became democratic in the 90s, in a sense, those genre filmmakers sort of disappeared, and everyone sort of started to enjoy romantic comedies and happy-go-lucky type of films. And thankfully, the recent generations of filmmakers, about 21st century, sort of picked up what we had before. And I think a film that sort of had a breakthrough, was the film called Chaser from Na Hong-jin. That sort of created new, sort of a nitty-gritty, tough type of violent films, which those elements are now all implemented into all kinds of films in Korea. Whether it's a romantic comedy, you have to have a certain action scenes in it. You have to have the horror films, of course you do. And Colin mentioned about his first exposure to Korean cinema as being Valking and excuse me, and being the Tell Me Something. Tell Me Something is one of the psychological horror film. The genre, even though there are new interest in genre filmmaking from the young audiences, the government, however, doesn't sort of respect genre film still. Because it's headed by same old farts who are 50, 60 years old, and they've been around since 1980s. I'm being frank because I'm not in Korea right now. So in organizations like Korean Film Council, when they do support the film programs or film projects, they always have genre titles or as a sort of like a background. They don't necessarily want to openly support, genre titles because, hey, this is a B movie. It's not something, nationalistic or what have you. But we talked about this yesterday also. The three mainstream filmmakers who are shooting overseas, in fact in Hollywood, are all genre filmmakers. Park Chan-wook, who's a director of Old Boy, Thirst. Bong Joon-ho, the guy who did The Host, and Kim Ji-woon, who did I Saw the Devil, Tale of Two Sisters. These are all genre filmmakers, and they are making names for not only themselves, but for the Korean film industry as well, just being the directors for these Hallyu films. The Stalker, with what's the wife of Tom Cruise's ex-wife, starring her. And then you have The Last Stand with Kim Ji-woon, who's directing with Arnold Schwarzenegger as his return to big screen. And then you have Bong Joon-ho, who's doing Snowpiercer, based on the French best-selling French comic book. So then you have to ask yourself, so what does genre serve purpose in Korean film industry? Well, I think through, nationalistic, you say, or maybe genres, gore, it's not really for average audiences. But in a sense, those films are intelligent enough to be accepted by general audiences as long as audiences are open to grasp those films. And, Colin runs a film festival, and Todd runs a film festival, and I'm also involved in film festival. These are genre film festivals, and through these festivals that we get to introduce these, what we have as genre titles. And from the help with them, I think these directors, the three directors I mentioned, they were able to achieve the international fame. And I wonder if it was just regular dramatic films, except for two, Kim Ki-duk and Hong Sang-soo. I seriously doubt that they would have achieved the same acclaim, international acclaim, as these three genre filmmakers did.
And while you mentioned that the state support money is not going to genre films so much in Korea, I come from Finland, and actually now the thing is that apart from Aki Kaurismäki, the only Finnish films that have actually broken internationally are genre films, Rare Exports and Iron Sky, and now I'm quite positive that the Finnish Film Foundation is very much in favor of genre films at the moment. With Iron Sky, one of the reasons why it became a big hit all around the world was that it had a fan base already before it came out, and that was all because of clever use of social media and being in touch with the fans of the project. That also goes for The Raid. So Todd, could you tell a little bit about your plan on that film?
Yeah, I mean, what we did with The Raid was quite different and had different goals than what was done with Iron Sky. But I mean, I know Timo, I know those guys a little bit, and the producer's sitting right there. Timo, the director of Iron Sky, is a flat-out genius when it comes to social marketing and social media and how to use it and how to mobilize. I mean, I think anybody that's interested in how to use crowdsourcing, or like not just in terms of money, but in terms of talent and in terms of getting a pre-invested audience, like an audience that really wants it, the absolute best way to learn that stuff is to go back and look at what Iron Sky did. Because they were incredibly, incredibly intelligent about it. And they engaged their audience in more ways than just, here's a website, come look at the pretty pictures. They were encouraging people to actually create and get involved and make suggestions on design and things like that. So they had an exceptionally engaged audience. You know, with the raid, it was much more about, what we did online was much more about building towards sales targets and things, and using online community to essentially validate the film in the minds of the market. And to prove to people, you know what, there's an audience that's going to see this movie if you distribute it. And this is the fundamental issue, I think, with a lot of art house right now. On my website, we recently ran an interview with Christopher Boe, the Danish director, who's kind of, I love him. He's one of these guys who straddles the line between whether it's art house or whether it's genre. There's always strong genre elements, but he tends to skew farther art house. And the interviewer who was talking to him asked him, you know, with VOD in America and VOD coming more into Europe, is this going to save art house? Because the distribution model has been so difficult and is just continually narrowing and narrowing and narrowing, especially in America. There's almost nobody distributing art house anymore, and the scale that they're doing it on is incredibly small. And Christopher's answer was really interesting, and what he said was, you know, I would like to hope so, and the rest of the directors and the people that I know and that I work with and who I consider colleagues, we would all like to hope so. But the reality is I need to consider that the fact is probably that this is not a distribution problem, it's an audience problem. I'm making movies people do not want to see. And I mean, it's a hard reality for somebody in his position to come to, but it's also correct. If people wanted to see those movies, there would be people distributing them because there'd be money involved. If there was money to make, they would do it. And so what we were doing with the online work was essentially to say, to build up enough of a response and enough recognition and enough public interest that you can walk into a room, because although, I mean, we had a good trailer and we had all these things, it's like, name another Indonesian film you can walk into a video store and buy. It doesn't exist. Distributors all want to talk about comparables. We don't have any. We used Ong Bak a lot as a comparable because it was a movie that was in a similar situation, but there really wasn't a clean comp for us. And so what we tried to do was be able to walk in, and instead of saying, well, here are similar sales numbers for similar films, which don't exist, we were able to walk in and say, look at these video numbers of this, what came out. Look at the coverage. We could walk in with a book of press clippings before the movie was completed. And say to people, look at the reaction. These are the people that you're going to end up needing to sell this movie to. They want it, and you can use online media that way. It's incredibly helpful.
And you did well in theatrical release, but the main market is on DVD, I guess. Yeah,
we did. We were really happy with the theatrical numbers, but. Again, anything that's foreign language is not going to be distributed hugely. And again, especially in North America, I'm not sure how much this carries to other places. But in North America now, unless you're a blockbuster that's opening on 3,000 screens, the theatrical release is really not intended to make any money. The theatrical release really is PR for the home video. In the VOD numbers. That's always been the case for genre, though. I mean, genre films have always made their money on video, dominantly, and yeah, that's where it really is. To judge things based on theatrical releasing numbers in North America at this point is mostly pointless.
Are there any specific subgenres that are now currently working well, or there's a specific interest in, for example, Indonesian film has broken out now? So
I think they're basic things. From working in the sales company, I can say what people are coming in asking for, and very, very consistently, people want action. Action works everywhere. And I think fundamentally why, and I think you'd probably agree with this, when you watch these movies with an audience, it's not about the technical skill of the fighters. That appeals to the hardcore fan base. The biggest reactions come when people fall down. Always. And it's a universal thing. Like, everybody knows what that feels like. So it plays everywhere. And I think the other thing that's really rising right now is really intelligent, cerebral science fiction. There are ways that you can do really good sci-fi that really has a lot to say, and you can do it on budget. And again, to go back to Vanishing Waves, to look at the success of Moon out of the UK, and films like that, there's hunger and desire for that, and there's an audience, kind of people in their 30s who grew up reading, Asimov and Philip K. Dick and Heinlein are over here, Stanislaw Lem and the Strugatsky brothers, and people like that who want something more from science fiction than just explosions and CG. And it's a genre that lends itself to that, like, all kinds of stuff incredibly well. And there's an incredible, rich, varied tradition particularly in Eastern Europe and into the Soviet territories of science fiction that's almost completely untapped. There's a huge amount of material out there. And I mean, really what Colin and I would know about it, and what most people in America would know about sci-fi from here, we know because of Tarkovsky. That's fundamentally why people know about Stanislaw Lem, or they know about the Strugatsky brothers in the West. But we know enough about it to know there's more. And people want it, and you see it online every time a new Lem-based project comes up. Like, the fan reaction is instant because they know who he is by reputation. They've had the chance to read some of his work in translation, and people want it.
They may not translate actually into, I think, at least not yet, to Asian markets, especially for Korea. Korea is known for the black hole for science fiction because all the local production for science films have never succeeded. And I think the main problem would be from the West. Now you have those rich history of all these H.G. Wells already. You have the authors that you have mentioned, which the Koreans do not have. And this, and I think I can speak for Taiwanese as well. That it's a new phenomenon for us. Perhaps, hopefully, through that, that's why we have fantastic film festivals. We can have, for example, you mentioned films like The Moon. We would love to have that, but the sales agent didn't give it to us. But that's the type of film that our core audience would love to see in our festival. And there are other, for example, science fiction of mind would be something like Michel Gondry. And we'll have that. It's an automatic selection, I think. And those, to me, wouldn't be sort of seen in regular cinemas, even though he's a big name. Theaters are not going to make money. And the only way to see those films will be through festivals. And I think that's why the Fantastic Films festivals are here to showcase those Western science fiction films, which may be for the real educate young filmmakers, and then maybe bring fresh products among themselves, and then maybe show us, and then maybe we can introduce to Western festivals.
So one Korean success story recently is I'm forgetting his name, but the director of Invasion of Alien Bikini.
Yeah, it's
where
Young-do. When you say,
he's a guy. He made a movie for almost no money.
Right.
Went out internationally, completely won a festival in Japan, in Yubari, and off the back of that, this movie that he made for nothing got like a proper theatrical release in Korea. I have no idea if anybody went and saw it, but the fact that somebody could make a movie for 10 grand and have it distributed is incredible.
It worked because of collaboration between Yubari and, in a sense, PFAN. To me, they are B movies, and they are not really well made. They have eye-catching, icons, which you can get a chuckle out of maybe. But to me, Invasion of Bikini is we showed it. It's a fun film, but seriously doubt that it will have a box office and kind of features. And maybe that's also a problem with the system in Korea, where the distribution exhibition, production distribution exhibition is now it's monopolized by virtually like 3 companies, and those type of films will never see the light as a wide release, and but I'm glad you mentioned the Oyeon film. I will make sure that he gets the right accolade because he deserves it.
I mean, another example of Korean science fiction would be Save the Green Planet, which is a fabulous dark black comedy, but the initial release in Korea was kind of botched because it was almost mismarketed as a romantic comedy.
And it also bombed at the box office.
Yeah, but that was also because of the marketing which was in place. But because of film festivals, fantastic film festivals, the film has gotten a life outside of Korea, and actually did secure American distribution. Very small, but I mean, the film now has a lasting legacy.
And maybe I hope there's some better, more advancement through better understanding among audiences that science fiction can be a viable genre, I hope. And that's, I guess, where you guys come in. Help market those young filmmakers from Korea with science fiction. So we'll see.
Yeah. And one thing we talked about yesterday was if you're making a genre film in a market which doesn't have a history of genre stuff, don't just make a local version of genre cliches or elements. Colin, you had some thoughts on that yesterday about that there are films that are just kind of local versions of what genre is supposed to be, or someone thinks it's supposed to be.
If you're thinking about from the story point for genre films, for thrillers, for action films, black comedies, you have to make sure that it's not kind of too locally rooted, that it will be able to be translated to foreign audiences. I mean, we were talking about Marantau, where the basis of that film was about a rite of passage for young men, which everyone knows in Indonesia. And that really kind of was the anchor of the film, and that actually hindered audiences because they couldn't quite understand it. It's like if you anchored your action film around a bar mitzvah, but no one knows what a bar mitzvah is. So you have to make sure that obviously you're trying to aim for local success, but you still have to be aware for international success that you're not hindered by local customs, which just unfortunately might not be understood.
Yeah, I mean, there's a balance you have to strike. I mean, part of the appeal for the international audience is that things are exotic. But if you become too exotic, it becomes alienating. And there are certain territories that are just phenomenally difficult to translate. Comedy is one of them. Comedy is incredibly regional. And
I mean, we were talking about Filipino films the other day, where they're really great, fun horror comedies from the Philippines. But the problem with all of them is that around 50% of the film has these comedic elements that in the West's eyes are just so stupid. But local audiences love to scream and laugh. Horror comedies are huge, but again, these elements in the West just don't belong in that genre. And so we'll see films we'll see films all the time which are like, this is really good, this is really, oh, you have mentally retarded jokes in this film. Bad, like just really horrible local. No, I don't want to sound so bad about horrible. It's just like, it just doesn't work in the international eyes. And we see that stuff all the time where it's like, if only they were able to fine tune it, but we understand that that did help the film become a local sensation.
Yeah. And it's just, you need to just be conscious in the development where if you have something that's a key story element that's going to take you 5 or 10 minutes in your story to explain to an international audience like what this custom is or what this history is, that's probably not a good thing. There are times when it can be, but it becomes a block for people. And an example when we were talking last night, I have a director, a friend of mine who's a director in Mexico, and his last film just won a bunch of Mexican awards, and he's figuring out what his next project could be. And two of his options. He's got a script that he wants to do, like a larger budget, kind of Genet-styled fantasy about the creation of mezcal, which is kind of a fun idea. If you know what mezcal is.
Explain what mezcal is.
Mezcal is basically tequila's cousin. But it's made in very, very small quantities. It doesn't export very much. There's a lingering belief that it's got the same core ingredients as mescaline, so if you drink too much of it, you get high and you start to hallucinate. And there's a bunch of stuff, but it takes a lot of explaining, like what I'm doing to you right now. His other option is he's got a script about a guy who's afraid he's going to spontaneously combust, which is just funny. And so I'm like, well, it depends what you want to do and who you want your audience to be. If you want to make the movie just for the Mexican audience, the mezcal movie would be great, and maybe you'll get lucky and it'll cross. If you want to look at something in terms of what's going to pitch and be more easily accessible to an international audience, you do the spontaneous combustion film.
So, which we're talking about the limits of genres, and now we're talking about comedies. So, can a comedy film be seen internationally as a genre film? Last night we talked about the clown film from Denmark, which is very, very extreme in its humor, but seems to have a lot of screenings at fantasy festivals around the world, or like genre film festivals.
Yeah. Comedy can work, but it's difficult. There aren't a ton that do. Though 2 years ago at Fantastic Fest, we added a comedy section, a comedy competition, because of clown to a great degree, and because of a Dutch film called New Kids Turbo, which then we did their sequel this year as well. And yeah, it was, the success of clown, it's difficult to pin it down too much. Part of it, what gets people through the door at first, and certainly what gets you in the marketing, is the more extreme elements of it. You can pitch it to people as if you liked The Hangover, you're going to like clown. But I think what fundamentally makes the movie work, and it's based on a television series as well, it's not just the comedy, it's that it's based in these two men kind of trying to figure out masculinity and getting it really badly wrong all the time, and just consistently making the worst possible decision that they ever could. And I think that's in the case of clown, that's what makes it work more than that the gags are gross, because people can get that anywhere. Everybody makes that at home. What clown did better than anything that's come out of America is it got the male psyche really, really well. It's a film that is much, much, much smarter than you think it is when you go into it. And the performances are it's really funny.
And this might be worth addressing, is that the type of films that we're talking about, you might think it's like, oh, okay, well then we'll just make a film which is going to be about a zombie or a giant monster or something. That's not what it is at all. The films that are memorable and have broken out are films that maybe on first glance are simply a horror film, or in the case of The Host, a monster film. But within that, there's actually much more of a deeper social drama going on. When I talk about The Host from South Korea, yeah, it's not a monster film. It's a film about a family, and it's a film about the struggles of a family. And it just also happens to star a giant monster. But the same like with Let the Right One In, you basically, you have your kind of more fantastic and maybe what's considered exploitable elements, but within that, that's where you have the ability to really craft a story which is going to have social meanings and political meanings. Yeah, to just, the last thing anyone needs right now is another zombie film. Unless you're making a zombie film which has something else going on in it.
Yeah, well, Let the Right One In is a great example of that. I mean, the power of Let the Right One In and the way people react to it, it's like they came to see it because they saw the trailer and it looked cool, but it became a phenomenon because it is a really, really powerful coming-of-age story. That they found this core image in this relationship between the boy and the creature that really, really captured how alienating it is to be a child. And to be faced with all these urges and impulses that you don't really understand. And it used the genre elements as an allegory for something that's universal. And did it fabulously well. And it's something that is common and it's experienced by everybody. And so you use the genre element as a hook to get your audience. But then you can layer in, the successful ones layer in.
Yeah, you can actually be quite subversive with your storytelling, and so this has kind of brought about elevated genre, which is kind of a subsection of this, where it's like, okay, elevated genres are films which have a deeper meaning to them. They're not just superficial and exploitive.
Same goes for Rosemary's Baby, for example.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yep. So we've almost been for an hour here, so I'd like to open the floor for questions, if anybody has anything to comment or ask our panelists. Did we get it all right, in your opinion?
Well, I want to actually mention something about.
Yep.
Sorry, my voice is kind of low, so I think I need a microphone. A lot of things that that Todd and Colin talked about, that's something you guys can definitely relate to because of Western maybe understanding. But for example, some of you, if you are trying to do a business with the Asian, for example, with mentalities, then some of what they mentioned may not translate into. They mentioned that the comedy, how the Filipino comedies may not translate well. What the thing is, U.S. comedies do not translate well at all in Korea. So, for example, Adam Sandler, who is a big star, mega million, what have you, all of his films flopped in Korea. So the guy who's a buyer is a friend of mine. He's bankrupt because so it's a two-way street. So if you're trying to do something with Asian partners, then you do have to understand the mentality, whether it's a genre film. Thankfully, the genre elements do translate better than dramas and comedies. So for example, horror films do translate well, but that's something that you should keep in mind if you want to do genre elements with Asian partners.
And there is like almost always market for horror films, for example. There is a demand, but the ones that succeed have to be smart, I would guess. Colin, when you're offered hundreds of films a year, which ones make it to the festival?
Yeah, with the Midnight Madness selection of the Toronto Film Festival, yeah, my summertime is spent watching bad films. I feel like I'm like that young boy who's inside playing piano while his friends are outside playing baseball. And it's, I mean, the heartbreaking thing is that I do understand the challenge of making films, and I don't like to easily dismiss films because I know it's like, look, this director put everything on the line. He was able to deliver. If you've delivered a film which has got a cohesive narrative edited together from point A to point B, perfect, that's amazing. And it's like speed dating. I try and be as kind of engaged and kind of give constructive criticism on the films. However, at the same time, I see so much stuff which is just solely, when it comes to the horror films, just out to shock. I've seen so many films which are a twist or a variation on the Saw concept of 2 characters, 3 characters waking up in a room and they don't know why they're there.
Yeah, 10 of those a year.
Oh, 10, yeah, yeah. Again, zombie films. See so many zombie films, and that it's just been done. It's been so done. However, you can do new twists on it, and then you can also, if it's done for an audience that's not used to it, a perfect example, it's a film which I wasn't crazy about, from Cuba, called Juan of the Dead. And Juan of the Dead had every zombie gag in it I'd seen before. And for genre film fans, it was old hat. But for the audience that likes Latin American films, they'd never seen Shaun of the Dead. They would never see that kind of film. But to see a film which has got political allegory about Fidel Castro and communism with zombies, that is how they were able to relate to that story. But yeah, I see a lot of just very gratuitous horror films, and it's got to have a twist to it. It's got to have something new, and it's got to have actually also humanity in it, which is an element which is often missing.
I think it's got we have a bit of a bigger programming team. You got to wade through more stuff on your own than I do when I'm on the programming side. But to me, it's about voice. You can usually tell within the first 10 or 15 minutes if there's the personality of the director on it, and you can tell that they're doing something here that they mean, and that'll carry you a long, long way. And it's got to have a voice to it.
Somehow by default, genre films are usually low-budget films. Maybe this is more a question for Todd. What do you think safe budget is that you can recoup the investment with understanding that the film is not hugely successful, let's say medium success?
There are a lot of variables in that. I wish my partner Nate was here because he's the one who actually is dealing with the sales figures. In general, the sweet spot tends to be somewhere between 1 and 2 million. Then there's a gap between probably 3 and 8 where you just never ever want to go, because you're then too big to recoup if you end up being a video release, and you're too small to really spend the money to have the splash to get a big release. So you're in this nether region that eats people alive. And then things seem to pick up again around 15. Where it can make sense. So people tend to end up either 2 or lower, or
above.
Yeah. But the in-between stretch is pretty tough. It can be a very dangerous area to play in. There are films that work in that area, but it's risky.
Anybody? Yes, please.
What do you guys think of properties like Twilight and Walking Dead, and like what implications that has for genre in the long run?
In terms of what I think about Twilight, I think it's not made for me, and that's fine. Running a website, I kind of hate my audience sometimes because genre fans, as passionate as they are, can also be total douchebags who insist on absolutely everything being made for them. And not everybody in the world is a 35-year-old white guy, and they fail to understand that a lot. It's like when Hunger Games came out and everybody was criticizing it for ripping off Battle Royale and softening it. And I'm like, yes, that's exactly what they did. And my 11-year-old son thinks it's awesome. And it is a gateway for him. Because of the Hunger Games, I can now turn Will on when he's a little bit older into George Orwell and Aldous Huxley and Ray Bradbury and people like that. So for a lot of people, those are gateway things. They've got their place. It's not what I'm interested in particular. Walking Dead, I'm also not a particular fan of. I don't think it's particularly well executed on TV, but it is certainly very, very popular. And I think TV, at least for the West, TV is becoming a format that makes a lot of sense for this sort of storytelling because it allows a lot of long-form stuff. And I think you're going to continue to see people going that way. You've already seen, because of The Walking Dead, people piling on with American Horror Story and other shows that way. Better example of like a genre television series that's actually really, really good is Game of Thrones, which is awesome. Really, really sharp writing, really, really good actors, really good talent behind the camera, and it uses the format very well. So,
I mean, for me, like a series like Walking Dead, yeah, I enjoy long-form storytelling, and TV is an excellent opportunity to be able to do that. I'm not crazy with The Walking Dead. I find that it's ultimately a little too much of a soap opera. I do like survivor stories, and that's what's kind of intriguing. It's actually got really nothing to do with the zombies. I'm not really interested in the zombie angle in Walking Dead, and actually the more that I think about it, I'm actually, and coming from someone who loves horror films, I'm actually quite disturbed with Walking Dead, with the amount of violence in that show. And the fact that if you look at George Romero's zombie films, all of his films actually do have a humanity to the zombie characters. In Walking Dead, the zombies just simply play an excuse to have violence and killing. It's just like body count. And the amount of on-screen violence that they get away with, just because if the zombies were real people, you'd never be able to do that. It's like if you think about Irreversible, the head-smashing scene in the beginning of Irreversible is horrifying and revolting, because it should be, because it is an act of violence. But that type of scene is shown week after week on Walking Dead, and not a problem at all. Yeah, I'm kind of almost a little conflicted about that, and I'm always quite shocked at the violence for TV, although it is not specifically public television, it's paid TV, so not like general audiences aren't being exposed to it, but it kind of raises an interesting...
Where the lines are.
Yeah, what is the line? Yeah.
Well, speaking of Korean market, Walking Dead doesn't exist. I mean, first of all, the people who are interested, well, they'll use a P2P site to download film, because it's not even introduced in Korean cable network or CJ if they are not interested in buying the title. Of course, Twilight Enterprise, that's I don't consider that as a genre phenomenon. It's more like a teen phenomenon. So whether it's here in Korea or Japan or Italy, I think teenager pops because of Robert Pattinson and Kristen Stewart. It's their images, not necessarily.
Is it a good idea to make a vampire film right now?
My hunch would be probably not, unless you're doing something new with it. Vampires have been very saturated over the last couple of years, the way zombies were, and the next wave that is already gearing up is werewolves. There's been a good little flood of those. It's cyclical. You know, you got to give yourself some breathing room in between things.
I have a question for Todd. Sorry, I was just jumping in. Did you talk about the kind of potentiality of the local content, or let's say genre content for the US market? I mean, something that we tapped on is the sci-fi, of the local sci-fi.
Yeah, I mean, we did talk a little bit about the sci-fi and how there's a tradition here. But there are other things out there too, where you can really look at
Folklore.
Yeah, like there's localized folklore all over the place. I was in Manila in March, and I picked up some graphic novels there called. Is Kevin still back there? I'm going to say it totally wrong. But there's a graphic novel series called Trese, I think. It's Trese. And it's all built around Filipino folklore and creatures, and they've got a lot of them that don't turn up in other cultures. And somebody is actually doing an adaptation of it now. It's in prep. And I'm dying to see that movie. It's going to be fantastic. But again, because it's got a plot line that follows a format that is familiar, and then the creatures add this layer of exoticism to it. And it's got a very, very strong character. That one's going to work because of the character. But yes, that sort of thing is always very fascinating. It's like, why do ghost stories stay around, and why do they remain so popular? I think ultimately it's because I would say at least 75 to 80% of the people in this room have a ghost story of their own. some sort of experience that they've had, or they know somebody who does. Like that's everywhere in all cultures. And where it gets really interesting for people and why the whole Japanese horror wave hit when it did, I believe, is kind of the American way of telling these stories had been very tapped out and become very formulaic. And then here comes Hideo Nakata and Takeshi Shimizu and this wave, Kiyoshi Kurosawa, and these directors who are very, very gifted technical directors who are doing something frightening. But what really hammered these things home is they were coming out of cultures that actually really, to a degree, believe that the dead are still with them and they take their ancestors seriously. And there was a type of sincerity to those original J-horror films that was completely lacking in the American films, and all of a sudden everybody went, oh my God, and it became an international phenomenon. And those things that are just, they're familiar enough for people to walk in and immediately understand what's happening, but just a little bit different, it makes everything fresh again. And I think that's the great potential of kind of folklores and things. There's a ton of folklore scattered throughout Europe that people think they're familiar with, but they're not really. I am dying for the day that somebody in the UK makes a movie about Celtic blood magic. Because there's people in America everywhere that go, oh, I'm Irish. You're not fucking Irish. You've never been there. You grew up here. Your grandparents might have been Irish. And so there's this fake familiarity with the culture that when somebody actually does something with it, it's going to mess them up. And there's tons of those communities and tons of those traditions. A good local example is a film that Colin selected this year, or not super locally here, but closer than Ireland. This Norwegian film, Kalle, done for hardly any money, but it attracted a lot of attention immediately because it was built around this local folklore creature that was completely unfamiliar to most people outside. And the style of the storytelling and the type of story they were telling was familiar, but it had this new element that made it all very, very fresh and very engaging.
It's the same with like Troll Hunters. So these are films which are traveling. I mean, when we were talking about how it's like, well, just be aware of what the local cultural content is in the story. At the same time, there are local stories that are so fresh and new to foreign eyes and also exotic.
Yeah, it's all in how you frame it.
Yeah, like I'm still waiting for someone to make a really great film about Krampus, which is like a Christmas tradition that we don't have in North America, but which is so horrifying. But yeah, I mean, there's loads of stuff that you've been told in your past as young kids from your grandparents that would probably make really creepy stories and films.
Thank you. Thank you, audience, and thank the panelists. It's a wrap. Let's keep it fresh.